Hi everyone, Novels Wonderland here. Welcome back to the channel.
Welcome to Novel Wonderland Naruto Infinite Reincarnation Chapter 65 to 73, Chapter 65, Crowdfunding Entrepreneurship. 1,526 words. Chapter 65, Crowdfunding Entrepreneurship. Strictly speaking, quite a few shinobi clans in Konoha already ran their own industries. The Yamanaka clan operated flower shops. The Noro clan dealt in medicinal herbs and similar goods. Even the Uchiha clan controlled multiple businesses to supplement the clan's finances. These industries were the foundation that allowed those clans to sustain themselves. However, in Yu's eyes, their operations were nothing special. Their revenue and scale were, at best, child's play. With Minato's connections and reputation, as long as Yu did not directly compete with those clan businesses, there would not be any major issues. Even the Sarutobi clan, the clan the third Hokage came from, would give him some face and would not reject him openly. For Yu, that alone was an enormous advantage. People always said things were easier when you had someone powerful backing you. In Konoha, Yu's situation was not just having someone in a high position. Everyone at the top was his people. Under those circumstances, how hard could it be to start a small business? Go ahead and do whatever you want to do, Minato said. He did not fully understand Yu's plan, but he understood Yu himself. He knew Yu would not act without confidence, so he simply gave him a free hand. I might actually need your support for this, Sensei, Yu said softly. Otherwise, it'll be hard to take the first step. Borrowing Minato's influence was only one reason he came. There was another, even more important reason. He needed money. Yes, Yu had no money. That was perfectly reasonable. He had graduated from the academy, but he had only worked at Konoha Hospital for a short time. He had some savings, but nowhere near enough to start a business. In contrast, Minato was wealthy. He was an elite jonin, and he had very few places to spend his money. Over the years, his savings had piled up to a considerable amount. So there are things even you can't solve, Yu, Minato said, smiling in amusement. He was used to seeing Yu calm and confident. It was rare to see him in a situation like this, and Minato could not help finding it funny. Without hesitation, Minato took out all of his savings and handed them over. This is everything I have on hand right now. If it's not enough, Kushina should have some too. However, getting money from her might be a little troublesome. So it's probably better not to. Compared to Yu, Minato was well off. But Kushina was truly rich. She had come with an inheritance from the Uzumaki clan. Even though most of it was lost after the clan's destruction, what remained was still enough to make her a wealthy woman. Unfortunately, borrowing from her private stash was not easy. With her fiery temper, a lecture was guaranteed. Minato did not want that headache. It's fine. Yu smiled. This is enough. There's no need to trouble Sister Kushina. He only lacked startup capital, and Minato's money was sufficient. As for Kushina, he had no interest in walking into that storm. Consider this money an investment, Sensei, Yu said with a smile. Maybe before long, I'll be able to give you a surprise. Then I'll wait and see, Minato laughed, not taking it too seriously. In Minato's eyes, Yu was clever, but he was still young, with no business experience. Success was far from guaranteed. Business was not that simple. Minato gave him the money because he wanted Yu to try, not because he expected a return. Yu could more or less sense Minato's thoughts. He did not explain. He only smiled, turned around, and left. He moved quickly, recruited people in no time, and immediately pushed forward to the next step. First, he went to the Uchiha. A factory? Fugaku looked puzzled when he heard Yu's intention. Why would you do that? It's part of the plan, Yu explained. If it's handled properly, it might even help with the Hokage election. Help with the Hokage election? The moment Fugaku heard that, his eyes sharpened. Without hesitation, he allocated a large sum of money to Yu and gave him an unused piece of Uchiha clan land as a production site. As the clan head, he had that authority. Putting the site aside for the moment, the funds alone were already an enormous amount for Yu, several times more than Minato's savings. It could not be helped. Fugaku was the Uchiha clan head, and he could afford to be generous. After securing Uchiha funding, Yu proceeded at a steady pace and visited the Yamanaka, Noro, and Akimichi clans one after another. Many people in those three clans were Minato's former comrades. Even the clan heads had once served under Minato. There was plenty of goodwill. With Minato's name behind him, Yu was almost unstoppable in those places. The heads of all three clans met him quickly. Once they learned he was preparing to start an industry and that Minato supported it, they did not waste words. They invested on the spot. In an extremely short time, before Yu's factory and storefronts even opened, he already had the backing of the Noro, Yamanoka, Akimichi, and Uchiha clans. And that still was not the limit. With Minato's reputation, if you wanted to, he could have pulled in even more investors. If he were shameless enough to borrow Jiraiya's name too, he might have even gotten the Sarutobi clan to invest. The reason he stopped here was simple. This was enough. With funding secured from multiple major clans and no shortage of land for production and sales, it was time to get to work. He acquired a similar business model from outside Konoha and, after a few minor modifications, put it into production. Within only a few days, Minamikawa food stores opened in multiple locations across Konoha. The initial product line was limited, mostly portable instant noodles and other convenient items that tasted good. In Yu's eyes, that was clearly not enough. In the coming days, he would keep sending people out to purchase more products and fill the shelves. But even that small variety was met with overwhelming enthusiasm. On opening day, every Minamikawa food store was packed. A huge number of people from the Uchiha, Noro, and Yamanoka clans flooded in, pushing each location into chaos. Why? Because Yu issued vouchers. As a businessman, he did not forget to give benefits to his investors. On the day Minamikawa food stores opened, any shinobi from the Uchiha, Noro, Yamanoka, and Akimichi clans received free shopping vouchers. With vouchers in hand, they could spend in the stores. Naturally, that drew a massive crowd. And once those crowds formed, they attracted even more customers, who came in and spent real money. As for the cost of the vouchers, it was simply an opening promotion. Unsurprisingly, the stores performed extremely well. Konoha's residents had strong spending power. Most families had at least one shinobi, and shinobi in this era were unquestionably a high-income group. As long as their needs were met, they did not mind spending. More importantly, Yu's products did not taste bad at all. He had hired specialists for development and held multiple tasting events to select the best types and flavors. With no similar competitors and strong demand, the results were naturally excellent. Everyone, be careful. At the orphanage, Kabuto carefully directed the children as they worked. The opening of Minamikawa food stores changed many lives. And among all of them, the ones changed the most were these orphans. There were many children in the orphanage. They were young and could not do heavy labor, but they could handle basic tasks like packaging and labeling. To improve their lives, Yu deliberately outsourced part of the work to the orphanage. As long as the children completed the tasks on schedule, they received payment. It improved their lives dramatically. In the past, they had food and a place to sleep, but everything was stretched thin. Pocket money was out of the question. Now, because of Yu, they could rely on their own effort and exchange labor for real compensation. And it was not just the orphanage. The same was true inside the clans. After the Minamikawa food enterprise started, most of the workers came from the Uchiha and the Aino Shikacho clans. Even inside shinobi clans, ordinary people made up the majority. After all, many lacked talent for ninjutsu. Konoha's finances were limited. It was impossible for everyone to be placed on the official shinobi payroll. And with industry still scarce in this era, even within the clans, most people could only farm or run tiny side businesses to survive. Now Yu's factory gave them another option. Working there offered decent benefits, stable work, and it was much easier than scraping by in the fields. The better Minamikawa food stores performed, the better the treatment for the workers. In this short period alone, the enterprise had recruited over 1,000 employees. All of them came from those clans. Check out my Patreon for advanced chapters on all my fanfics. Patreon.com's fanficlord03. Chapter 66, Chapter 66, Reincarnating Again. 2023 words. Chapter 66, Reincarnating Again. The shinobi clans were more than willing to send the ordinary people within their clans to work in Yu's businesses. After all, the treatment was guaranteed, and it also solved a major headache for them. A shinobi clan was a collective. The elites in a clan were powerful shinobi, but the common members still had to be supported. There were also those who had retired from the battlefield and could no longer serve as shinobi. All of them needed the clan's relief and arrangements. Every year, the clans had to spend enormous amounts of effort and money to take care of those people. Now, they could simply send them to work under Yu. And it just so happened that Yu was also short on manpower. So, from the very beginning, he made one rule clear. He accepted everyone. The overall quality of these clan members was far better than ordinary civilians. Not only were they generally literate, most of them also possessed chakra and had gone through some basic training to refine it. Hiring them meant the baseline was already high. With a little training, they could become capable workers, and they were easy to manage. After all, they came from shinobi clans. Even if they were not shinobi, they had received some degree of shinobi education, which made them far easier to organize than ordinary people. Of course, accepting people was only the first step. During the first month, you did not rush into expansion. Instead, he focused on building structure. Clear job divisions. Clear supervision. Clear pay rules. Clear punishment for laziness and theft. The clans did not send their people to be humiliated, and you did not want his business to become a charity. If the foundation was unstable, scaling up would only collapse faster. Minato quietly watched all of it and did not interrupt. The boy was calm, methodical, and far more mature than his age suggested. By the third month, the flow of workers from the clans became steadier. Not because you begged for it. Because the first group that returned to their clans had one thing in common. They were being treated well, paid on time, and managed properly. That alone was enough to make the clan heads loosen their grip. And once the clan heads loosened their grip, more people followed. You began separating the workforce into teams and departments. Training schedules were standardized. Work hours were fixed. Output targets were posted plainly where everyone could see them. Even the retired shinobi who could no longer fight found their place. Some became instructors for discipline and routine. Some became guards and warehouse watchers. Some became supervisors who kept the younger workers in line. It was not glamorous work. But it was stable. By the 5th month, you began recruiting more aggressively. Not just workers, but key roles. Bookkeepers who could handle accounts. Foremen who could keep a team functioning. Logistics runners who could coordinate materials. Storefront managers who could deal with customers without embarrassing the company. To the clans, it looked like the business was finally taking shape. To you, it still was not enough. A business did not become powerful from a single burst of momentum. It became powerful from repetition, reliability, and control. By the 8th month, something subtle began to change. The clan started to realize that the more employees they had under you, the more attached they became to his stability. Many of your own people were earning their living under you. For that reason alone, you had to look after him a little, didn't you? Otherwise, if Yu's businesses collapsed, what would happen to the jobs of your clansmen? You did not say such words out loud yet. He did not need to. The clan heads could reach that conclusion on their own. By the time a full year passed, Yu's operation was no longer a simple project. It had become something with weight. The workflow was predictable. Orders were consistent. Supply routes were secured. The employee roster had grown large enough that losing even one department would hurt, not just you, but the clans that had placed their people inside. And that was the point. You did not want temporary support. He wanted support that could not be casually withdrawn. Clan heads, you once said with a calm smile during a meeting that was supposed to be routine, you would not want your clansmen to be unemployed, would you? Nobody laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was true. Of course, things had not reached that point completely. But as time passed, and Yu's businesses continued to expand and his employee count climbed, that day clearly was getting closer. 2 years after the first investments, Yu began settling the company's accounts and distributing dividends. This much money. Minato was genuinely stunned when he received his share. At the beginning, he had only given Yu money because he wanted to support him. He never expected Yu to hand him such a huge surprise. In 2 years, Yu had already returned the money he borrowed, and not in a symbolic way. The numbers were clear. The records were clean. There was even a surplus. From now on, profits each quarter should be even higher than this, Yu explained, his tone steady, as if he were stating something obvious. You're really incredible, Minato said, unable to hold back his amazement. He had always known Yu was capable. As a shinobi, as a planner, Yu had always been sharp. But Minato never expected Yu's business sense to be this terrifying, producing such a result in such a controlled, consistent way. I didn't really do much, Yu said, shaking his head at the praise. He did not think it was anything special. Even an ordinary person would likely succeed quickly if they held resources like his. It was only a matter of speed and direction. That's already impressive, Minato said with a smile. Ordinary people don't have your ability. It was not just Minato. You also sent statements to every other investor. Without exception, including Fugaku, all of them were pleasantly surprised by the results. They had invested mainly out of respect for Minato and had not expected much. But Yu's performance had clearly exceeded their expectations. Even shinobi clans needed money. Or rather, a stable fighting force required constant financial support. The profits Yu was delivering to the major clans were already significant, something even a great clan like the Ucha could not ignore. Barring any accidents, they would pay much closer attention to Yu from this point onward, and they would be far more invested in the company's operations. Yu stayed at Minato's home for a while longer, then his expression shifted slightly. If you have something to handle, go ahead, Minato said with a smile, sensing the change. You don't need to stay here too long. Yes. Yu nodded. Then I'll take my leave. He bowed to Minato, then left. After he stepped out, he returned home quickly and looked forward. A familiar panel appeared in front of him. Name, Minamikawa Yu. Reincarnations, 1, Reincarnation points, 2730. I can reincarnate now? A smile spread across Yu's face as he stared at the panel. Without realizing it, he had lived in this world for 2 years. In that time, he had accumulated a large number of reincarnation points, but his reincarnation count had always been stuck. Now, the change had finally appeared. To Yu, it was a good sign. Let's begin. Without hesitation, he initiated reincarnation. Please select your reincarnation target. 1. Civilian. 2. Ninja. 3. Servant. Consuming 100 reincarnation points will allow you to continue selecting identities. The familiar panel returned, unchanged from before. As he stared at the options, Yu thought, the samurai option is gone, but there's a ninja option now. Is this era different from last time? By now, Yu had more or less grasped the panel's patterns. Reincarnating through the panel did not send him to his current world. It likely sent him to something like a parallel timeline. And which era that parallel timeline belonged to depended entirely on luck. He could be thrown into ancient times like his last reincarnation, or into a future era. It was all a roll of the dice. But since the options now included ninja, this world should be later than the last one. At the very least, it probably was not an era where even something like chakra did not exist. Without hesitation, he spent 100 reincarnation points to unlock more options. 4. Gecko Clan. 5. Kagaya Clan. After 2 rounds of options, Yu paused. He ignored the Gecko Clan. It was a small shinobi clan with no special Kekkei Genkai and no particularly unique inherited techniques. Choosing it would not mean much. The Kagaya clan, on the other hand, had a powerful bloodline and clearly offered better value. But when you considered the environment the Kagaya clan faced, he decided to keep selecting. Soon, new options appeared. 6. Ucha Clan. The moment he saw it, Yu's eyes lit up. It's you. He did not hesitate any longer. He made his choice. The Kagaya bloodline was terrifying compared to ordinary people, but it could not compare to the Ucha. Maybe in raw violence they were not too far apart, but for Yu, who carried Otsutsuki Karma, the Ucha bloodline was far more suitable. He confirmed immediately. In the next instant, time seemed to freeze. Everything around him halted. Only Yu's mind remained active as it began its journey. Another world. Inside the familiar Konoha, in the Ucha clan's ancestral lands, a baby was born. A cry rang out, and the midwives responsible for the delivery let out a sigh of relief. But a heartbeat later, they froze. This is Sharingan? The Ucha midwife stared at the newborn. The baby was small and adorable, still covered in the remnants of birth, but his eyes were unbelievably clear. And within them was a single Tomo. It was the Sharingan. The discovery stunned everyone. The Sharingan was the Ucha clan's unique Kekkei Genkai, the source of their strength. From the Warring States era to the present, the reason the Ucha could stand on equal footing with the Senju, and be hailed as the strongest shinobi clan in the Land of Fire, was because of the Sharingan. Yet even among the Ucha, awakening it was not easy. It usually required intense stimulation. And now a child had appeared who awakened it at birth. In Ucha history, that was almost unheard of. The news spread quickly. Soon, the Ucha clan had arrived personally to see the child. Let this child be named Kei, he said, staring at those pure Sharingan eyes, joy filling his face. In this era, he will inherit the Uchiha and bring our clan to glory. Time passed, and the news raced through Konoha. This era was the time of the second Hokage. The first Hokage had only recently passed, and Tobirama had officially inherited the position. He was in the middle of pushing through reform after reform. The creation of Anbu, the establishment of the Ninja Academy, all of it began under his hand. With the Uchiha clan openly promoting the news, Tobirama soon heard of it as well. Oh. Tobirama's expression shifted when he heard. Born with the Sharingan? That is an unusual phenomenon. As the second Hokage and the lifelong rival of the Uchiha clan, Tobirama was the one who had studied the Uchiha most deeply. To some extent, even the Uchiha themselves might not have understood their own bloodline as well as he did. And because he understood that bloodline, he knew what this signified better than anyone. That child's bloodline is extremely powerful. To awaken the Sharingan at birth means he surpasses many of his clansmen from the start. Thoughts flickered through Tobirama's mind. If he is nurtured properly, he might not be a bad candidate. TL, check out my newly released fanfic. Germany, the 1000-Year Empire. Check out my Patreon for advanced chapters on all my fanfics. p@treon.com's fanficlord03. Chapter 67, Chapter 67, Young Tsunade. 1650 words. Chapter 67, Young Tsunade. Even though many people viewed Tobirama as the Uchiha's greatest opponent, his hostility toward the clan was not as deep as outsiders imagined. He disliked the Uchiha more because he understood them too well, and because he knew exactly what kind of existence that clan could become. The madness of an ordinary Uchiha was self-evident. To awaken the Uchiha's true power, the Mangekyo Sharingan, one had to experience love, then lose it. Without bone-deep love and bone-deep hate, without emotions intense enough to drown a person, the Mangekyo was almost impossible to reach. But if someone truly could awaken it, that usually meant they were not exactly normal. One way or another, there was often a hint of paranoia in them. Tobirama, who had studied the Uchiha like no one else, understood that reality clearly. That was why he remained wary of the clan. It was not even fair to call it prejudice. If you claim a healthy person is sick, then you are the one with a problem. But if someone really is sick, and you recognize there is a problem, that is simply a fact. Tobirama belonged to the latter. That child's father is dead. He took the infant's file, read it carefully, and soon formed a plan. The father of that Uchiha baby had died in battle for Konoha when he was still young, leaving only a mother and child behind. In that case, arrangements would be much easier. With that thought, Tobirama's expression remained steady as he continued issuing orders. Time passed little by little. In a blink, several years slipped away. The child who had been born back then had grown significantly and was now a cute little boy. He displayed astonishing talent, able to read classics and hold conversations with adults when he was only 2 or 3. Every word and gesture made him look like a tiny grown man. His Sharingan also advanced as he grew, and it had reached the 2-Tomo stage. As expected, this power fits better with Kagaya's seal. Walking alone beside a stream, you looked at the scenery and let the thought drift through his mind. Even he had not expected this reincarnation's identity to be a newborn. Fortunately, Konoha was not at war right now, and the shinobi world was generally peaceful, so there was no risk of dying young. After reincarnating, he also discovered changes within himself. Just like last time, he brought over some of his original body's abilities. The most important among them was Kagaya's seal power. By now, you had mastered many different abilities. But among everything he possessed, Kagaya's seal power was the core of the core. It was the foundation that allowed him to pursue an Otsutsuki body in the future, to truly transform into an Otsutsuki. To put it bluntly, as long as Kagaya's seal power existed, even if he did nothing else, there was a high chance he could eventually become an Otsutsuki. Of course, without outside help, that transformation might take an unimaginable amount of time. You had already tested that in the main world. He stayed there for a full 2 years, and the body's transformation progress was still painfully low. If a complete Otsutsuki body was 100%, then his progress in the main world was less than 5%. It was far too slow. But after reincarnating, things were different. After entering this world and gaining the Uchiha bloodline, Kagaya's seal changed. It felt like a missing puzzle piece had been added. His body's transformation progress suddenly leaped forward. Even though this reincarnated body was still very new, and the power of Kagaya's seal had only recently spread through it, the transformation progress was already comparable to his original body, and it had even surpassed it. The reason was the Uchiha bloodline itself. My original body had no bloodline limit. Compared to Kagaya's seal power, it was basically a blank slate, so the transformation was slow. I had to accumulate power little by little and reshape the body into an Otsutsuki body. Sitting by the stream, you let thoughts flicker one after another. But this body is different. This body already carries components of the Otsutsuki, so the transformation accelerates massively. The Ucha bloodline came from Indra. Indra's bloodline came from the Sage of Six Paths. In terms of lineage, that made them Kagaya's descendants. Kagaya's blood was already present inside them. In other words, the Ucha were originally descendants of Kagaya. So when you reincarnated and Kagaya's seal within him came into contact with that bloodline, the transformation rate surged. From this perspective, if I want to finish the transformation as quickly as possible and complete the metamorphosis early, I need to gather as many fragments of Kagaya's bloodline as I can, and complete the bloodline puzzle. Only then can I become a true Otsutsuki body before my original body's lifespan runs out. With that realization, you felt as if a fog had lifted. A new goal formed instantly. He rose from the stream, looked toward Konoha in the distance, and murmured, then the first step is to start collecting the bloodline puzzle of Hagoromo. Kagaya's bloodline was inherited by Hagoromo and Hamura. Hagoromo's descendants split into the Uzumaki, Senju, and Ucha. Hamura's descendants included the Hyuga, as well as the Otsutsuki line on the moon. And by coincidence, most of those bloodline descendants were inside Konoha right now. Among Hagoromo's descendants, both the Senju and the Ucha were here. Among Hamura's descendants, the moon line was impossible to find, but the Hyuga clan was here as well. In theory, if he thoroughly searched Konoha, he could gather most of the puzzle pieces he needed. Of course, theory was theory. Reality would not make it that easy. Whether it was the Senju or the Hyuga, they were major clans. They would not let him do whatever he wanted. If he truly intended to achieve his goal, he first had to become the village's ruler. In other words, he had to become Hokuge. Hokuge, huh? Standing there, you smiled. That's actually a good goal. To be honest, even after living in this world for a while, you had never seriously thought about becoming Hokuge. But now that he had a reason, it was worth trying. And the timing was perfect. Once he set his goal, time began to move quickly. He started actively showing his capabilities. Inside the Ucha clan lands, he behaved differently from most Ucha. He enjoyed interacting with others, and he showed no discrimination toward shinobi from smaller clans. When he was 7, he took the initiative to apply to the ninja academy founded by Tobirama. That decision shocked many people. At this point, even though the ninja academy existed, Konoha's shinobi forces were still dominated by clans. Clan shinobi trained within their families and rarely entered the academy. The ones who truly attended were mostly shinobi of civilian origin. Yet you came from the Ucha, one of Konoha's only 2 great clans, and he was a famous genius among them. His move drew immense attention. It also earned Tobirama's quiet approval. As Hokuge, Tobirama created the academy not just to train civilian shinobi, but to gradually merge Konoha's forces, to make the village's shinobi integrate into a single family called Konoha. Right now, the various clans stood tall. They could cooperate, but they still maintained independent status. It was like building little kingdoms inside Konoha. One wrong step, and the village could fracture and collapse from within. The academy was Tobirama's answer to that danger. From that perspective, Yu's decision aligned perfectly with Tobirama's intent. In the following years, Yu's performance only grew more brilliant. In just a few short years, he graduated from the academy with overwhelming results. By then, his Sharingan had advanced again, reaching the 3-tomo stage. This year, Yu was 12. So you're Ucha K. A soft child's voice called out from in front of him. Yu looked up. A little girl with blonde hair stood there, staring at him with curiosity. She looked about 4 or 5, wore the Senju crest, and was undeniably cute. Yes, I am. Yu leaned down and smiled at her. Are you Tsunade? You know me. Tsunade's eyes lit up instantly, and her interest flared. You've heard my stories too. Yes, I've heard some, Yu said, nodding. I heard a god of gambling appeared in the Senju, and even the first Hokuge was no match for her. God of gambling. Tsunade froze for a beat, then reacted fast. She planted her hands on her hips, pride written all over her face. That's right. That's my title. Then she took 2 steps forward, slapped a hand on Yu's shoulder like she owned the place, and spoke boldly. Kid, you've got good sense. Why don't you follow the great Princess Tsunade? When I inherit the Hokuge seat in the future, there will definitely be benefits for you. I can consider it in the future. You did not laugh. He lowered his head, thought seriously for a moment, then shook his head. But not right now. Why not? Tsunade demanded. Because the current Hokage isn't you. You pointed toward the Hokage rock in the distance and smiled. Even if I want benefits, wouldn't it be better to follow Tobirama right now? Why would I wait for you? HMPH. You need long-term vision. Tsunade got anxious, as if you had just committed a crime. Don't be fooled by Grandpa Tobirama's serious face. He's actually stingy. You won't get benefits even if you flatter him, so you might as well consider me. Invest a little now, give me some money, and when I become Hokage in the future, you'll get plenty of benefits. Check out my Patreon for advanced chapters on all my fanfics. Patreon.com's FanficLord03. Chapter 68, Chapter 68, Prelude to the Start of War. 1676 words. Chapter 68, Prelude to the Start of War. Watching Tsunade's serious expression, you could not help but chuckle. What do you need money for? To gamble, obviously. Tsunade said as if it were the most natural thing in the world. You just called me the god of gambling, so I have to go gamble. That annoying Grandpa Tobirama not only confiscated all my New Year's money, he even forbade me from gambling. Once I grow up, I will definitely. At that moment, a figure appeared behind Tsunade, silent and soundless. You tried his best to warn her with his eyes, but she was too excited to notice. She kept shouting enthusiastically. Definitely what? A cold voice came from behind her. Tsunade instantly shuddered. Gee, Grandpa Tobirama? She turned and stared at Tobirama standing behind her, as if she had seen a ghost. Instead of learning something useful, you spend all day thinking about gambling tricks. Tobirama looked at Tsunade with a frosty expression. You are disgracing Big Brother's face. What do you mean? Tsunade protested stubbornly. Great-grandpa gambles too. Hashirama was just like Tsunade, a true gambling addict. Tsunade's gambling career had actually started with Hashirama. But under Tobirama's cold gaze, she suddenly did not dare to say another word. Tobirama was not like Hashirama. Hashirama could laugh and mingle with children. Tobirama was not so easygoing, and he never held back when discipline was needed. I actually think Lady Tsunade's little hobby is fine, you said softly from the side. Life is very long. If you only do missions, it gets boring sooner or later. Having some entertainment once in a while is a good thing. Right. Tsunade's eyes lit up and she nodded rapidly. She is not just looking for a little entertainment. Tobirama shook his head. Other people might not understand what kind of personality Tsunade had, but how could he not know? If she was not restrained, she would become a hopeless gambler sooner or later. Of course, judging by what happened later, even strict discipline probably would not change much. Forget it. Tobirama glanced at Tsunade and shook his head. Go on. Leave first. I still have some matters to handle. Tsunade looked at you, winked at him, then ran off at top speed. Soon only you and Tobirama remained. That child has not had many friends since she was young. Tobirama watched Tsunade's retreating back, and his gaze softened slightly. If you have time, interact with her more. If possible, keep an eye on her, so she does not keep breaking prohibitions. Right now, Tsunade could be described as a problem child. Of the 3 shinobi prohibitions, she was breaking 2 at the same time. Not only did she gamble, she had already taken a liking to drinking at such a young age. Looking at it long term, the future did not look encouraging. Yes, I will, you replied with a smile. Lady Tsunade is a very good person. I hope you can still say that later. Tobirama shook his head, neither agreeing nor denying. Then he changed the subject, and a trace of admiration appeared on his face. I have already read your proposal from some time ago. It was well written. Konoha truly does need a group of professional medical ninja. I have thought about it for a while, and you are the most suitable candidate to lead this medical squad. What do you think? Konoha had not been established for long, and many systems were still incomplete. For example, the medical ninja system was something that the later Tsunade advocated and perfected. But right now, Tsunade was still just a child, so naturally it had not developed to that point. That was why, some time ago, you took the initiative to propose building a complete medical ninja system within Konoha to better maintain the village's operations. Tobirama had read the proposal and strongly approved of much of it. In his view, the plan was already quite thorough. Without enough ability and vision, no one could have written something like that. To Tobirama, Yu's vision was rare, even rarer than his talent as a shinobi. I am not old enough, and I worry I may not be able to command respect, Yu said after a moment of thought. However, if Hokage-sama gives me this opportunity, I am willing to try, and I will do my best to handle this matter well. It is good that you have this intention. Tobirama nodded. Among the current medical ninja in the village, you are the strongest. I believe you can do it well. Just like in his previous life, after this reincarnation, Yu once again displayed outstanding medical ninjutsu, shaping himself into a true genius in the field. There was no other way. This identity was simply too useful. No matter where you were, medical ninja were respected. Not only did they often hold high status, they also did not need to go to the battlefield to fight and kill. It was the same here. In the current Konoha, the training system for medical ninja had not been officially established, and even institutions like a medical squad did not yet exist. There were not many medical ninja in the entire village. Under these circumstances, with Yu's current level, he already had the reputation of being the #1 medical ninja. After talking with Tobirama for a while longer, Yu bowed respectfully and left. Behind him, Tobirama watched Yu go, then fell into thought. From the day Yu was born until now, Tobirama had always kept an eye on this Uchiha genius. In his eyes, Yu was extremely special. Yu's talent as a shinobi was terrifying. At a young age, the chakra in his body was already vast, and the development level of his Sharingan was also very high, reaching the 3-tomo stage when he was only 10. His overall strength was powerful. Even within the Uchiha, he could be considered an elite. Yet by Uchiha standards, he was also an obvious outlier. From birth until now, he had always behaved peacefully and quietly. Tobirama had once observed him secretly in the ninja academy. He was friendly to everyone. Even at school, he took care of his classmates. He was warm-hearted. Anyone who met him would think he was a gentle, peaceful child. But while that kind of temperament would be normal elsewhere, inside the Uchiha it felt strangely out of place. Something about it did not match. Still, for Tobirama, that was not necessarily bad. The more approachable Yu was, the easier it would be for him to integrate into Konoha as a whole. When he truly grew up and could lead the Uchiha, perhaps he would become the opportunity for the clan to integrate into Konoha, becoming a bridge between the Uchiha and the village. Just like Tobirama's student Kagami. Unfortunately, his age is not quite right. Thinking of Kagami, Tobirama could not help feeling a trace of regret. In terms of talent and genius, Yu's performance far surpassed Kagami's. If possible, Tobirama would have been willing to take Yu as a student and train him as a future high-level leader of Konoha. But Yu was still too young. Taking him in personally would be somewhat inappropriate. It would be more suitable to leave it to Hiruzen and the others. With that, Tobirama turned and left. From that day onward, Konoha's medical department was officially established. Like the Anbu, it was an institution directly under the Hokage. Yu took charge of the entire medical department, becoming its first head. In that sense, he had risen in a single step, going straight from an ordinary figure to a member of Konoha's leadership. One had to understand that even the Uchiha clan head currently only held the position of captain of the police force. Yu's status as head of the medical department was, to some extent, already on the same level as the head of the police force. However, the medical department had only just been created and had not drawn much attention yet. In the short term, Yu's standing still could not compare with those long-established figures. Yu did not mind. He was happy to stay out of the spotlight and quietly build his reputation. Unfortunately, even if he wanted to develop in the background, many people still fixed their eyes on him. On this day, after an Uchiha clan meeting ended, the clan head summoned Yu alone. The clan head looked at Yu with a complicated expression. Tobirama let you lead the medical department. What do you think about it? In what sense, clan head? Yu's face remained calm as he asked. His intentions, the clan head said. And his purpose in placing you in charge of that department. Lord Tobirama's intentions may not be that complicated, Yu replied softly. It is nothing more than preparing for war. War? The clan head's pupils constricted. From the day Hashirama founded Konoha until now, the shinobi world had been peaceful for over a decade. The major clans had enjoyed peace for over a decade as well, and they had grown complacent. Could it be that war was truly about to break out again? That is not surprising, is it? Yu smiled. In the past, wars were between one clan and another because the powers of the past were individual clans. Now individual clans have been folded into villages. But there will still be disputes between village and village. It is no different from the past. It is different. A trace of gloom flashed in the clan head's eyes. If war breaks out between villages, the scale will likely be far greater than before. In the past, wars were between clans. Now, it would be between villages. If war truly began now, it would inevitably surpass the old era in scale. Check out my newly released fanfic. Title: Jujutsu Kaisen, starting with your reaches template. Check out my Patreon for advanced chapters on all my fanfics. Patreon.com's fanficlord03. Chapter 69, Hiruzen Sarutabi. 1576 words. Chapter 69, Hiruzen Sarutabi. That is indeed the case. My Namikawa Yu spoke quietly and let out a long sigh. Lord Tobirama likely saw this coming, which is why he started preparing early. Tobirama was a sharp man. As Hokage, it was impossible for him not to anticipate the storms that could rise in the ninja world. Preparing in advance was only natural. Whether it was approving Yu's proposal to establish the medical department ahead of time or moving other pieces into place, it all pointed to the same conclusion. Preparation for what was coming. The Acha clan head fell silent, seeming to sink into thought. You've been clever since you were a child. I won't waste words. After a long pause, he looked up at my Namikawa Yu again. If you need anything, tell me. Never forget, we are of the same clan. Yes, I understand. Yu smiled. I'll keep that in mind, and I won't forget your teachings, clan head. Of course he would not forget the Acha. He still needed the Acha's strength if he wanted to compete for the Hokage seat. He had been born into the clan, and as long as he managed things properly, the clan would be his most reliable backing. There was no reason to loosen his grip on that. After speaking a little longer, he turned and left. In the days that followed, he threw himself into building the medical department. It was a complicated task, essentially constructing a full medical system from the ground up. Beyond forming a medical squad, there was the daily operation of Konoha Hospital to consider as well. Most importantly, he had to establish a training system for medical ninja. Only then could Konoha produce enough personnel to avoid a permanent talent shortage. That was also the hardest part. Konoha had not been founded for long. There were not many medical ninja in the village to begin with. Forget running an entire system, even finding enough instructors was difficult. In the end, you had no choice but to step in himself. He opened medical tutoring classes, specifically training civilian shinobi and preparing them to become instructors for medical ninjutsu. During that process, he stumbled into a few unexpected surprises. Tsunade often showed up to join the fun. Even though she was still young, she was genuinely interested in medical ninjutsu and frequently attended the lectures. Her learning speed was frightening. Among the entire training group, she was always near the very top. Her talent for medical ninjutsu was beyond question, even greater than my Namikawa Yu's. To be honest, Yu's own medical level was outstanding, but much of it came from time and from having access to a complete system earlier than most people. Even so, when it came to learning new techniques, his speed still could not match Tsunade's. Fortunately, his foundation was solid, and Tsunade was still young. For now, he could still stay ahead without losing face. The Yin Seal, This technique doesn't really help me as it is. Inside the medical squad, my Namikawa Yu held a scroll and let his thoughts shift. Establishing the medical department brought him many benefits. Besides gaining authority as a department head and building influence, the biggest advantage was access. Free access to high-level medical ninjutsu scrolls. Konoha might not have many medical ninja, but it did have a fair number of recorded medical techniques. Most of those techniques were stored within the Hokage's exclusive scroll of seals. Ordinary people had no right to even look at them. But now that Yu headed the medical department, he naturally had the qualifications. He could choose from many top-tier medical techniques and learn them. Among them, the mystical palm technique was an excellent option. By using chakra to stimulate cells, it could accelerate recovery across the body. Even for Yu, it would be very useful. However, there was another technique that attracted him even more. The Yin Seal. It was a special technique that overlapped between sealing arts and medical ninjutsu, capable of storing chakra within the body in normal times and releasing it when needed. It could store chakra, slow aging, and maintain a youthful state for long periods. In the future, Tsunade's strength of 100 technique and creation rebirth would both be built on the Yin Seal as a foundation. You valued it less for those surface effects and more for its potential to be modified. As the daimyo of the land of ancestors, he carried a whole set of chakra application and storage technologies developed there. If he obtained the yin seal, he could use it as a framework and evolve it into a technique that belonged to him alone. And the idea of storing chakra within his body also appealed to him deeply. After thinking it through, he made his choice. The yin seal. Tobirama nodded after hearing it. A good choice. He did not hesitate. He directly handed the technique scroll to Yu. After receiving it, Yu was about to leave, but Tobirama called out again. How has Tsunade been doing lately? Very well, Yu replied. Lady Tsunade's talent in medical ninjutsu is outstanding. She's the most remarkable student I've ever seen. If given enough time, she might become the greatest medical ninja in the entire ninja world. Is that so? A smile appeared on Tobirama's face. Good. Then he looked at Yu and asked another question. What about my proposal from some time ago? Not long ago, Tobirama had made a suggestion. He wanted Yu to become his disciple, specifically as a student under Hiruzen. The political intent was obvious. Hiruzen had not been publicly announced as the successor yet, but among Tobirama's disciples, he was already the most likely next Hokage. Placing Kei under Hiruzen carried several meanings. First, it made Kei a bridge, a representative of the Ucha who would support Hiruzen in the future. It would help Hiruzen and also soothe the Ucha. It was the same reason Tobirama had once taken Kagami as his student. The method differed, but the goal and effect were similar. Second, Tobirama planned to place Tsunade under Hiruzen as well. If both the Ucha and the Senju stood behind Hiruzen, then Hiruzen's future ascension would be legitimate and unshakable. Beyond that, there was another layer. Tobirama was also cultivating Kei, granting him the status of a Hokage's disciple so he would be qualified to inherit the position someday. After years of observation, Tobirama was satisfied. This child was not only a genius, but also carried an uncommon steadiness and capability. Someone like that was naturally an excellent Hokage candidate. And if an Ucha became Hokage, the clan would have a real chance to integrate fully into Konoha, just like the Senju had done. Tobirama understood the Ucha too well. He understood their temperament, and he understood their grievance. Since the Ucha wanted a Hokage from their ranks, he would give them a path. Kei was outstanding, and Kei was Ucha. If Kei became Hokage, the rift between the Ucha and the village would likely be resolved at its root. All right. Kei only considered it briefly before nodding. He understood Tobirama's intent, and he had no reason to refuse. Seeing Kei agree, Tobirama said nothing more and simply dismissed him. The next day, at a training ground, Hiruzen and Kei officially met. It was not their first encounter. They had crossed paths many times before, and their temperaments were fairly compatible. This conversation flowed easily, without strain. Ha ha, is that so? Hiruzen was in his prime, standing at the peak of his life. He laughed openly. So that girl Tsunade actually has a side like that. Teacher, do you know Tsunade? Kei asked with a smile. I've seen her many times, Hiruzen replied, still smiling. She's a troublesome kid. It's rare that you can keep her in check, Kei-kun. As Tobirama's disciple, he had interacted with Tsunade plenty. He knew her personality well, which was why he was curious about how Kei managed to get along with her. She's not a bad person, Kei said. Her hobbies are just a little unusual. But people have their quirks. He looked at Hiruzen as if hinting at something. Wouldn't you agree, Teacher Hiruzen? Yes. Indeed. Hiruzen met Kei's gaze and suddenly looked a little awkward, as though he had remembered something he would rather not explain. As the future master of the so-called three prohibitions, Hiruzen himself could hardly claim spotless innocence. The telescope technique was something his future self would use more than once or twice. Because of that, he could not help feeling guilty under Kei's calm stare. Overall, Kei and Hiruzen got along extremely well. Hiruzen, in his prime, was approachable. His character was steady, and unlike Tobirama, he did not carry that icy severity. He could speak to anyone, and he made people feel heard. That charisma was exactly why he could rise above other candidates and become the undisputed successor. The two developed a quiet understanding as they talked. Of course, small interruptions still happened. In the quiet classroom, Tsunade's childish voice rang out sharply. You old pervert! Don't corrupt Kei-kun. TL, while the MC is reincarnated in this era, I will refer to him as Kei. Once he returns to his main body, I will switch back to you. Check out my Patreon for advanced chapters on all my fanfics. Patreon.com's Fanfic Lord 03. Chapter 70, Chapter 70, You Are the Hokage. 1651 words. Chapter 70, You Are the Hokage. Along with Tsunade's shout, her small figure lunged forward, and her fist came crashing down. Bang! Her body looked delicate, but the power behind that punch was astonishing, sending even the fully grown Hiruzen flying backward. Is this really the destructive power a child can have? Hiruzen came back to his senses. Looking at the wrecked ground in front of him, he could not help but feel a little ashamed. Although Tsunade was still very young and had yet to formally train in ninjutsu, having only followed Uchiha to study medical ninjutsu, the signs of her monstrous strength had already begun to appear. Even without mastering any ninjutsu, relying only on her natural power and basic taijutsu, she could already compete with many capable shinobi. Young people really do have fiery tempers. He wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and quickly found an excuse to retreat. Behind him, Tsunade still looked ready to charge again, but Kei grabbed her firmly and held her back. That old pervert deserved it. Tsunade fumed, her angry expression somehow still cute. He actually showed you those kinds of books. It turned out that Jiraiya's habit of writing Icha Paradise had roots. Their teacher, Hiruzen, had already been fond of those types of books in his youth. Although Icha Paradise had not yet been published, there were already plenty of similar works around. Hiruzen not only read them himself but had even tried to recommend them to his disciple, Kei, only to be caught red-handed by Tsunade. And so, the earlier scene had taken place. Kei looked at the furious Tsunade and could not help but feel a little amused. From his perspective, the books Hiruzen had shown him were nothing special. They could not even be called smut. At most, they were borderline. If they were going to be borderline, they should at least do it properly. Instead, they mixed in philosophical life lessons, making the whole thing feel awkward and unprofessional. If he were the one writing, he could definitely do a better job. Maybe he really could give it a try. Kei suddenly found himself interested. Not because of any benefits, but simply out of personal hobby. In his previous life, he had enjoyed writing and had even published several online novels with moderate success. It was one of his few true hobbies, and perhaps he could pick it up again in this world. He kept those thoughts to himself while calmly restraining Tsunade and preventing her from chasing after Hiruzen. Time passed. Within Konoha, while busy with medical infrastructure projects, Kei took advantage of the available resources to begin building his own laboratory. On the surface, the laboratory was for researching medical ninjutsu. In reality, it was meant for studying his own techniques and preparing for the future research on the first Hokage cells. Living in Konoha, Kei had not forgotten this enormous opportunity. As the reincarnation of Azura, the first Hokage cells contained Azura's chakra power. They were a bloodline puzzle piece he could not afford to ignore. Most importantly, obtaining this particular piece would not be difficult. If someone tried to pry into the bloodline limits of other clans, it would inevitably provoke backlash. But the first Hokage cells were different. They were simply there, unable to resist. As long as one held sufficient influence within Konoha, access for research was entirely possible. Many people would study them later on. Danzo and Orochimaru both conducted research on the cells. Even Tobirama might have studied them for a time. After all, a researcher's curiosity was difficult to suppress. In any case, Kei was not in a hurry. Each reincarnation came with a 50-year time limit, and he was only 12 years old. There was plenty of time. He remained in Konoha, steadily building his reputation and influence while waiting for the right opportunity. During this period, he also met Danzo, Koharu, and others through Hiruzen. Unlike the sinister figure he would later become, the current Danzo was still in his prime and appeared relatively normal. He rarely smiled and always carried a serious expression. At first glance, his temperament was somewhat similar to Tobirama, consistently cold and stern. Of course, how different their true natures will remain to be seen. Still, his strength was undeniable. At this time, he was second only to Hiruzen, placing him among the top elite jonin of Konoha. His stance toward the Uchiha was already somewhat radical, but for now, it was still within normal bounds. He was even quite friendly toward Kei, Hiruzen's disciple. Aside from Danzo and the others, the heads of the Aino Shikacho clans also gradually grew familiar with Kei during this period. It had to be said that Tobirama's arrangements had been extremely thorough. Around Hiruzen were not only elite shinobi of the younger generation like Danzo, but also the clan heads of the Aino Shikacho alliance. All of them maintained good relationships with Hiruzen. There was also Uchiha Kagami, a genius of the Uchiha clan and one of Hiruzen's close friends. combined with the support of the Senju clan he represented as Tobirama's disciple, as well as his own Sarutobi clan background, Hiruzen's political foundation was extremely solid. Under normal circumstances, Kei could not see anyone capable of shaking Hiruzen's position as Hokage. Unfortunately, Danzo did not seem to realize this. He continued to work tirelessly, trying to surpass Hiruzen in every aspect. Kei watched everything quietly, saying little and focusing only on his own work. At last, the turning point he had been waiting for arrived. A few years later, the Great War of the Shinobi world finally broke out. Aside from the remote San village, the other three great villages all declared war on the Land of Fire. The pressure on Konoha became unprecedented. In later history, this conflict would be known as the First Great Ninja War. It lasted for a long time, until every village grew exhausted and the intensity gradually subsided. In the end, the Reikage of the Land of Lightning was the first to falter, inviting the Hokage to peace talks and proposing a formal truce. Negotiations over the terms had taken a long time, but only recently had both sides reached an agreement. After confirming the sincerity of the truce, Tobirama personally led an escort unit to the Land of Lightning to sign the agreement with the Reikage. However, at the critical moment, disaster struck. The radicals of Kumogakure, the Kinkako brothers, were dissatisfied with the truce and launched a coup. In the chaos of the sudden attack, the Reikage was killed on the spot. Tobirama and his escort unit were also besieged and barely managed to escape the Land of Lightning. The pursuers are getting closer and closer. On a stretch of grassland, Tobirama stood at the rear, glancing back. If this continues, none of us will escape alive. Someone must stay behind to block them. As his words fell, the expressions of those present changed. Someone has to stay behind. Danzo took a deep breath. It's time. He understood Tobirama's meaning and had already prepared himself for this moment. But when he tried to step forward, his body hesitated. There was great terror between life and death. No one could face it without fear. The young Danzo was no exception. He wanted to stand up, but his body felt frozen. If I stay behind, I will definitely die. Do I really have to go? As a Konoha shinobi, as the teacher's guard, staying behind for him is only right. Even if I die, as long as the teacher and Hiruzen survive, it will be enough. His thoughts churned in turmoil. And while he hesitated, another voice sounded. Let me go. Across from Danzo, Hiruzen stepped forward without the slightest hesitation. He looked straight at Tobirama. Among everyone here, I am the strongest besides you. I am the most suitable for this rearguard mission. Teacher, please let me do it. His expression was firm, his gaze unwavering. Whether in the past or the future, Hiruzen might have had moments of weakness, but he never feared death. Facing this situation, he did not hesitate. While Danzo was still struggling, Hiruzen had already stepped forward and accepted the responsibility. As he did, everyone's eyes turned toward him. Hiruzen, you. Danzo stared at him, his emotions tangled and complex. There was relief at not having to die, shame for not stepping forward, and frustration at falling behind. Then, those feelings intensified even further. Tobirama looked at Hiruzen and, for the first time, a faint smile appeared on his usually stern face. Very good. He reached out and patted Hiruzen on the shoulder. New leaves must always take over from the old and lead everyone forward. Hiruzen, from this day onward. You are the Hokage. The moment those words fell, everyone was stunned. Especially Danzo. He stared blankly at Hiruzen, his entire body stiff. A surge of unwillingness rose in his heart, making him tremble slightly. From this moment on, the gears of fate began to turn. In the face of life and death, the second Hokage chose to stay behind as the rearguard, buying time for the newborn king. Carrying the second Hokage's expectations, Hiruzen and the others hurried back toward Konoha. Once we cross this river, we'll be within the territory of the Land of Fire. A few days later, Hiruzen looked at the distant landscape and let out a long breath. We'll be home soon. Our supplies are almost gone. We need to rest and replenish. Nearby, Koharu spoke while using medical ninjutsu to treat their companions. Kagami and the others are still unconscious. If we keep moving like this, there could be serious problems. Check out my Patreon for advanced chapters on all my fanfics. p@treon.com's fanficlord03. Chapter 71, Chapter 71, Killing one's master is a Hokage tradition, you must try it. 1672 words. Chapter 71, Killing one's master is a Hokage tradition, you must try it. Shaking off their pursuers along the way had been anything but easy. Even with the second Hokage holding the rear, they had still been repeatedly surrounded by shinobi from the Land of Lightning. There were no deaths yet, but injuries had piled up on nearly everyone. At this point, the only one who could still maintain anything close to full combat strength was the strongest among them, Hiruzen. "I'll go take a look over there." Hearing Koharu's words, Hiruzen slowly stood and spoke in a steady voice. "There should be clean water and prey in that direction. I'll bring some back. Koharu, watch Kagami and the others. Don't let anything happen to them." After giving his instructions, he headed into the forest alone. Finding food and water went smoothly. With Hiruzen's strength, securing enough prey and filling water supplies was easy. For him, tracking and concealment mattered far more than gathering. It's about time to head back. He stored the supplies and turned around, the thought just passing through his mind. Then, without warning, a sharp sense of danger surged up his spine. It was the instinct honed through countless brushes with death, an intuition that had saved him on battlefields more times than he could count. He did not hesitate for even a heartbeat. He twisted and retreated at once. Thud! A kunai shot in from the distance and slammed into the ground right where he had been standing. It looked like an ordinary kunai, but the force behind it was anything but. Wind-natured chakra clung to the blade like a razor edge. If it had pierced flesh, it would have been enough to tear a body apart. "As expected of you." A voice drifted from ahead, calm and unhurried. "Sarutobi-sensei?" Hiruzen froze, as if struck by lightning. You are." He stared into the depths of the forest, his expression turning grave. A moment later, under his watchful gaze, the figure stepped into view. It was a youth. 15 or 16 at most, wearing a white robe. He stood tall and straight, carrying a presence that made him impossible to ignore. Thin sunlight filtered down through the canopy, casting soft light across a handsome, sharply defined face. It was the kind of appearance that lingered in the mind, as if the heavens themselves had carved it with care, carrying an indescribable beauty. With just one look, it was hard to forget him. Disbelief flashed across Hiruzen's face. "Ki?" He stared at the youth, emotions twisting in his eyes. How could it be you? The person before him was none other than Ucha K. Meeting Hiruzen's gaze, K stepped forward slowly. His face remained calm as he spoke in a low voice. "I left a Flying Thunder God mark on you. Whenever I want, I can appear at your side at any time." A Flying Thunder God mark? Hiruzen's eyes widened in shock. "You actually know Sensei's technique?" Then he immediately shook his head, forcing himself to stay rational. "No. Even with the Flying Thunder God technique, you shouldn't be able to teleport across such long distances. Times changed. Even though both were Flying Thunder God, there was a world of difference between Tobirama's version and the one Minato would perfect in the future. The original Flying Thunder God was suited for combat, mainly short-range shifts. Tobirama could not do what Minato later would, freely crossing vast distances at will, or even teleporting away a tailed beast ball. As Tobirama's student, Hiruzen knew the technique's limitations well, and he pointed it out without hesitation. "I improved the Flying Thunder God technique." Kei shook his head, offering no further explanation. "Why are you doing this?" Hiruzen's gaze locked onto Kei. "If you had this kind of power, why didn't you present it openly? What do you want? If I have to say it, it's probably for the position of Hokage." Kei's voice stayed soft and even. "I'm doing this to seize the title of Hokage. You don't seem like someone who would covet the Hokage seat." Hiruzen shook his head, unconvinced. They had spent years together. He knew Kei well. There were people who would do anything for that position, like Danzo. But Hiruzen firmly believed Kei was not that sort of person. He trusted his judgment. Kei did not look like a man driven by hunger for power. Besides, even if Kei wanted it, there was no need for this. With his ability, and as Hiruzen's own student, the position would eventually be his as long as nothing went wrong. There was no reason to be so impatient. "If I must say, there are other reasons." Kei nodded, not denying it. "But to do those things, to achieve those goals, I still need to hold the title of Hokage. That is the purpose of what I'm doing." Under normal circumstances, Kei could have waited, quietly managing everything until Hiruzen stepped down. But his time in this world was limited. There was a constraint. Once 50 years passed, he would have to leave. And Hiruzen was in his prime, with decades of peak years ahead of him. If Kei waited until Hiruzen retired, there would be little time left before he was forced to depart. Practically speaking, acting now was the more realistic choice. The Hiruzen standing before him was the successor personally chosen by Tobirama. As long as he remained, seizing the Hokage seat would be extremely difficult. Only if this ideal successor disappeared would Kei have a chance to take the position as Hiruzen's disciple. Let's begin. Kei spoke quietly. In the end, shinobi matters must be decided the shinobi way. That's the principle you taught me, sensei. Fine. Hiruzen took a deep breath. He stared at Kei, resolve filling his face. No matter what happened to you, Kei, I won't let you have your way. Once I capture you, I will make you correct your mistakes. His hands moved in a rapid blur, signs forming in an instant as a surge of chakra erupted. Fire release, fire dragon flame bullet. A massive wave of fire roared forward, but just as it was about to strike Kei, it vanished without a trace. In the next instant, the same fire attack erupted again, but this time it hurtled straight toward Hiruzen himself. What? Shock flashed across Hiruzen's face, but his body reacted faster than his thoughts. He dodged to the side without hesitation. Boom! The fire slammed into the earth, erupting in a violent explosion. What is this? Hiruzen's expression darkened as he stared at Kei. Flying Thunder God Formation. Kei's voice remained calm. Just as I can teleport people, I can also shift and redirect another person's ninjutsu. To think it can be used like that, what a terrifying ability. Hiruzen's face turned grim. Your mastery of the Flying Thunder God technique has surpassed Tobirama Sensei's. If that's the case, then many ninjutsu will lose their effect. The thought flashed through his mind, and he moved at once, switching tactics. Summoning Jutsu, Enma. A burst of smoke exploded beside him as Enma appeared, then immediately transformed under Hiruzen's command into an adamantine staff. In the next moment, Hiruzen leaped forward. Boom! The ground trembled as the staff smashed down, carving out a crater. It was proof of what Hiruzen in his prime truly was, a top-tier powerhouse. Even without relying on ninjutsu, even with taijutsu alone, his strength was overwhelming and impossible to ignore. In pure taijutsu, there likely were not many in all of Konoha who could claim to be stronger than him. Unfortunately, even with that strength, his reaction speed was still a step too slow. No matter how fiercely he attacked, he could not land a hit on Kei. In the end, Flying Thunder God was simply too powerful. As long as the user's reaction was sharp enough, being struck was almost impossible. Hiruzen's overall ability was undeniably high. Whether ninjutsu or taijutsu, he was formidable, well-rounded in every category, like a perfect hexagon. But against a space-time technique like Flying Thunder God, he was still forced into a passive position with no easy answer. This won't do. After a flurry of attacks, Hiruzen's breathing grew heavy. I need a way to catch him. Compared to the old man he would become in the future, Hiruzen now was in his prime, with much stronger stamina. Even so, he was still human. He could not fight without end. After so many exchanges, fatigue was beginning to creep into his body. If this continued, he would be worn down and killed. So he hardened his heart, gritted his teeth, and charged forward again. Seals suddenly flickered from all directions, flaring at once. Sealing Jutsu! A massive sealing technique spread across the area, covering everything, leaving no angle to evade. Even with Flying Thunder God, one still needed a fulcrum, a coordinate to jump to. Hiruzen's intent was clear. He wanted to destroy all possible anchors, cutting off Kei's ability to keep teleporting. But in the end, he was disappointed. When the sealing technique faded, Kei's figure vanished once more. Damn it, where exactly is his mark? Hiruzen's mind raced. In the next instant, pain exploded through his chest. Hiruzen stiffened and looked down. A kunai had pierced straight through his chest at some point he had not even sensed. Crimson blood spilled down, splattering the ground. Yet Hiruzen did not panic. Instead, a smile appeared on his face. Got you. He grabbed Kei's hand, and the technique he had prepared long ago activated instantly. Genjutsu, Nightfall Jutsu. Powerful chakra surged through the kunai and poured into Kei's body. This was the opportunity Hiruzen had deliberately created. Only now, at this distance, with direct contact, could he finally cast a genjutsu that had a chance of taking effect. Check out my Patreon for advanced chapters on all my fanfics. p@treon.com's fanficlord03. Chapter 72, Hiruzen saw the future. 1653 words. Chapter 72, Hiruzen saw the future. Powerful chakra surged through the kunai, and the genjutsu took hold in an instant. This was Hiruzen's only chance. If he tried to use ninjutsu, even at close range, his movements would be far slower than Kei's. The other party would most likely evade, and Hiruzen would only waste chakra for nothing. Only a genjutsu, something that could be cast instantly, could turn the situation around and give him even a sliver of victory. The moment the illusion settled, the figure behind him went quiet, no further movement at all. It worked! Hiruzen let out a long breath, relief washing over him. He turned, intending to seal Kei first, then bring him back to Konoha and interrogate him carefully about the truth behind all of this. But the instant he faced him, he froze. Kei stood there calmly, completely still, his expression composed. He stared at Hiruzen in silence, serene and steady, with not the slightest sign of being bound by genjutsu. In his eyes, a pair of crimson three-tomo Sharingan spun into view, and within that gaze, something eerie seemed to bloom. Not good. In that heartbeat, Hiruzen realized how badly he had misjudged the situation. Kei had blended in too well for too long. Most of the time, unless he absolutely had to, he never revealed his Sharingan or used its power. Because of that, Hiruzen had almost forgotten what Kei truly was. A descendant of the Uchiha clan. Not just any Uchiha, but the most top-tier genius among them. A natural awakener of the Sharingan, with dojutsu talent so overwhelming that even within the entire clan, very few could rival him. And Hiruzen had tried to cast genjutsu in front of an Uchiha genius. The world lurched. The forest blurred, the scenery twisting and shifting like ripples across water. His genjutsu had been reflected. Because it was reflected, Hiruzen fell instead into Kei's illusion, sinking deep, unable to break free. One hazy vision after another emerged. Within the genjutsu, he forgot everything related to Kei. It felt like a blissful dream. In that dream, he successfully brought his comrades back to Konoha. He became the third Hokage before a sea of shinobi, then led Konoha through endless conflict, earning the title of shinobi hero. But as decades passed, he gradually grew old. Then, one by one, events began to spiral beyond control. The White Fang committed suicide. His disciples, the Sannin, drifted apart and went their separate ways. Aside from old comrades like Danzo, he no longer had a single person he could truly trust. He wanted to retire and pass the burden to the next Hokage, but the next Hokage died in the chaos, forcing the old man to take up the mantle once again. Itachi, must it really come to this? One night, a youth approached and knelt on one knee. He wore Ambu attire, yet carried the unmistakable marks of the Uchiha. Most striking of all were his eyes. A pair of Mangekyo Sharingan. In Konoha's history, eyes like these had only been recorded in the hands of the legendary Madara. Hokage-sama, there is no other way. Itachi remained on one knee, his expression cold. They are already planning a coup. If we do not prepare, the village will suffer immense losses. For the sake of Konoha, I am willing to carry out this mission. Itachi! Facing Itachi's request, the elderly Hiruzen let out a long sigh, his heart heavy with complexity. But in the end, he still agreed. A few days later, the prestigious Uchiha clan was massacred. Itachi bore the name of traitor and became Konoha's spy within the Akatsuki, operating from the shadows. Then the years accelerated, rushing by in a blur. Hiruzen saw the orphan of the fourth Hokage suffer inside the village, discriminated against, isolated, living a lonely and bitter childhood. He saw the Chunin exams, and his beloved former disciple return. He saw that disciple duel him using impure world reincarnation and kill him with his own hands. Yet even after death, the vision did not end. It continued. He saw Tsunade return to become the fifth Hokage. He saw Sasuke defect, the last blood of the Uchiha severing ties with Konoha, betraying Itachi's hopes. He saw the leader of the Akatsuki come to the village and destroy Konoha itself. He saw Danzo sink into darkness, hiding underground when the village was in crisis, turning into a monster who only knew power and profit. The Sharingan on that arm reflected Konoha's darkness more clearly than anything else ever could. At that moment, Hiruzen could not hold back tears. The hero of Konoha was framed and driven to suicide. The Uchiha, founders of Konoha alongside the Senju, were wiped out through internal strife. The son of the Hokage who died for the village was pushed to the margins, forced to live alone since childhood. A loyal Uchiha genius was ordered to slaughter his own kin with his own hands, bearing the name of rogue shinobi. The disciples he had loved left one after another, and the one he cherished most betrayed the village outright, bringing disaster to Konoha. His former friend fell into darkness, becoming an ambitious man who cared for nothing but power and gain. The village he loved was destroyed again and again by foreign enemies. He failed his teacher's trust. He failed the people who believed in him. Ugh! Hiruzen roared. Before he even realized it, his eyes were soaked with tears. The shock finally tore him free, and he woke from the genjutsu. Was that real? He stared at Kei, desperate for an answer. Even if it was an illusion, it felt painfully real, as if those decades were a future he would truly live. And that future was something he could never accept. It is an illusion, yet it is also reality. Kei met his gaze, expression calm. That is the future you were originally meant to experience. It's real, it really is real. Absurdity and despair flooded Hiruzen's chest. Just thinking about that future made him feel suffocated. Two voices battled within him. One screamed that it was all false, a lie crafted to deceive him. The other insisted it was true, undeniable. And at this moment, Hiruzen had to admit something. Kei had no reason to lie. If Kei wanted him dead, Hiruzen would have died countless times already. There was no need for such an elaborate step. You went through all this, just to reverse the Ucha clan's destruction. Hiruzen looked at Kei and asked, voice rough. So that's why you were waiting for me here. At this moment, he felt as if he finally understood a motive. After all, no matter how he looked at it, Kei had no reason to move against him. And based on what Hiruzen knew of him, Kei was not someone who valued the Hokage seat. But now, he seemed to have found a reason. Not exactly. Kei shook his head, voice soft. I do not have particularly deep feelings for the Ucha clan. I'm doing this only to achieve my goals. Hiruzen fell silent for a moment, then spoke. Promise me. Protect the village. Do not let the village come to harm. I will. Kei nodded once. If there is a chance in the future, perhaps you can see my results with your own eyes. As for now, please go to sleep, sensei. He raised his hand, and the kunai thrust forward, striking true, piercing Hiruzen's heart. Hiruzen simply watched, having lost any desire to resist. It was as if, along with that vision, his will to fight had vanished too. Unlike many others, Hiruzen might be weak-willed at times, and far too lenient toward his companions, but his love for the village was real. Without that love, Tobirama would never have chosen him as Hokage. For someone who loved Konoha from the depths of his soul, if his rule would lead to such an outcome, then yielding the Hokage seat to someone more capable might not be the worst fate. As the kunai pierced his chest, Hiruzen's consciousness faded, slipping into a long slumber. However, Kei did not actually kill him. Even if killing one's master was a Hokage tradition, Kei was not truly of this world. He could not be that heartless. Hiruzen was his teacher. They had spent years together, and their relationship had been, in its own way, pleasant. If it was not necessary, he did not want to kill. Just sleep for a while. Kei sealed Hiruzen, then placed him inside a coffin prepared in advance, speaking quietly. Perhaps when you wake up, everything will already be different. With that, he performed reverse summoning jutsu, teleporting Hiruzen away. If nothing unexpected happened, Hiruzen would sleep inside that coffin for several years before waking. And after several years, everything would already be settled. Someone else would already sit in the Hokage seat. Even if Hiruzen returned then, it would not matter much. This place needs to be disguised a bit more. After sealing Hiruzen away, Kei looked at the traces left behind and spoke softly. On the other side, Koharu guarded Danzo and the others, unease rising by the minute. Earlier, Hiruzen had gone to search for food and water, but far too much time had passed. With Hiruzen's strength, he should not have been delayed this long. Could something have happened? The thought made her chest tighten. With Hiruzen's strength, even if he ran into Kumogakure Shinobi, he'll be fine. Nearby, Danzo had already woken and spoke in a deep voice, staring into the distance. As Hiruzen's partner, he had full confidence in Hiruzen's strength. And just as his words fell, a sudden, violent explosion echoed through the forest. Check out my Patreon for advanced chapters on all my fanfics. Patreon.com's FanficLord03. Chapter 73, Impact. 1723 words. Chapter 73, Impact. Oh no. Hiruzen. The moment the explosion echoed from the distance, a heavy sense of foreboding rose in everyone's chest. Because that was exactly the direction Hiruzen had gone earlier. No one hesitated. They rushed forward at once, pushing through the forest as fast as their battered bodies allowed, and quickly reached the source of the blast. The area had been flattened. Under the sheer force of the explosion, the surrounding trees had been torn apart, the ground scorched and shattered. Everything that might have been there was wiped away, leaving only scattered debris and scraps of clothing strewn across the earth. And when they looked closer, they saw it. There were fragments of flesh and blood left behind. From the chakra traces still clinging to them, there was no mistaking whose they were. Hiruzen! Danzo stared, disbelief written across his face. How could this happen? The others reacted the same way. They had fought their way out of the land of lightning, survived pursuit after pursuit, and finally reached the point where returning to the village was within reach. And yet, at this final moment, something had happened to Hiruzen. I don't believe it. Homura's voice was hoarse, his eyes wide. With Hiruzen's strength, who could take him down in such a short time? As his comrades, they understood Hiruzen's strength better than anyone. Hiruzen in his prime undoubtedly possessed Kage-level power. With that strength, even if he was injured, even if he was ambushed by the Kinkaku brothers, he should have been able to hold out for a long time. How could he be taken out this quickly? But whether they accepted it or not, the truth was in front of them. They searched the area, desperate to find clues, hoping to uncover something, anything, that could explain what they were seeing. Then, from the distance, the sound of approaching movement began to swell. Not one person. Many. Damn it! Koharu's face turned pale as she listened. The Kumogakure shinobi have caught up. We can't stay here. But Hiruzen? Danzo's jaw clenched, reluctance burning in his eyes. Even if we stay, Hiruzen won't come back. Homura's face was solemn, each word heavy. If he's still alive, he'll return to Konoha on his own. We have to believe in him. Danzo went silent. For a moment, his expression twisted as if he was forcing something down inside himself. Then he finally nodded. Things had come to this. Whether they wanted to accept it or not, they had no way to find Hiruzen now. The only thing they could do was return to the village immediately and report Kumogakure's betrayal. If they stayed and were killed as well, it would be nothing but a tragedy, and a foolish one at that. With that decision made, they did not hesitate. They moved at once, rushing toward the land of fire. Behind them, a figure stood quietly, watching them disappear into the distance with a calm, unreadable expression. Half a day later, Danzo and the others returned to the village. They brought back the news of the second Hokage's death. In an instant, the entire village was shaken. Before this, everything had looked promising. Kumogakure had been preparing to sign a peace treaty with Konoha, and the attitudes of the other nations had begun to soften. How had it turned into this overnight? The second Hokage's death was a devastating loss. It was not only the fall of a top-tier powerhouse. It also meant the village had lost an outstanding leader. Did Lord Tobirama leave any instructions before he passed? Inside the Konoha hall, someone sat in silence for a long time before finally directing the question toward Danzo and the others. For example, regarding the successor as the next Hokage. As those words fell, the hall went silent again. Hokage was Konoha's leader, and it was also the most tempting position in the village. Now that Tobirama's death could not be undone, the question of who would become the next Hokage was the most critical matter of all. For a moment, everyone's gaze focused on Danzo's group. But under those stares, bitterness spread across their faces. Sensei, before he died, he designated Hiruzen as the next Hokage. After a long pause, Koharu finally spoke. Hiruzen. Those present nodded, unsurprised. Hiruzen becoming the next Hokage was not a sudden decision. It had been prepared for a long time. Long before that mission, Tobirama had already laid the groundwork for Hiruzen to take the seat. The next clan heads of the Aino Shikacho clans were his teammates and subordinates. The most promising and powerful geniuses of the younger generation, Danzo and Homura, were his friends, and they had always been convinced by him. Uchiha Kagami was also his friend. And Uchiha Kei, the reincarnation of Minamikawa Yu, was his student, representing the support of the Uchiha clan. With Tobirama representing the Senju, and Hiruzen representing the Sarutobi, that alone accounted for more than half of Konoha's power. With that level of backing, Hiruzen had been the perfect candidate for third Hokage from the very beginning. The belief, like Danzo once held, that Hiruzen only became Hokage because of a final heroic act and was appointed on the spot, was naive. And that was exactly why you wanted to deal with Hiruzen first. Because as long as Hiruzen remained, no one could compete with him for the Hokage seat. But once Hiruzen was gone, whether it was Danzo or Homura, neither of them possessed that same undeniable charisma and reputation. A massive vacuum would form. After that, the fight for Hokage would depend on each person's own ability. Hiruzen was attacked by Kumogakure rogue shinobi on the way back. After a long silence, Danzo and the others finally spoke the truth. His whereabouts are unknown. For a heartbeat, no one reacted. Then the hall erupted into stunned silence. Wait, what? A rebellion inside Kumogakure, the Hokage and the Reikage dying in the chaos, that was already shocking enough. But now they were saying the Hokage chosen successor was gone as well. The Hokage and the Hokage successor taken out in a single rebellion? What kind of madness was that? How could this happen? For a while, the people in the hall found it difficult to accept. In the corner, Yu stood quietly, watching Danzo and the others. He lowered his head, showing little emotion. Unsurprisingly, the discussion that day produced no meaningful conclusion. With the Hokage dead and the successor missing, they could argue until dawn and still end up with nothing. Clinging to a last sliver of hope, they chose to wait. What if Hiruzen returned on his own in a few days? After all, they had not seen a confirmed body. He was missing, not officially declared dead. But 7 days passed. And there was still no sign of Hiruzen. Under normal circumstances, 7 days was not long. But for someone of Hiruzen's level, 7 days was enough to return from almost anywhere. And yet even now, there was nothing. That was as good as a verdict. Hiruzen was likely truly dead, killed in the attack by the Kumogakure rogue shinobi. It was difficult to believe, but faced with reality, they could only accept it. The seat of the third Hokage was now vacant. And the moment everyone realized it, thoughts began to stir. Konoha had never lacked ambitious people. And the Hokage seat was the most valuable prize of all. Even Hiruzen's former friends began to develop their own intentions. Danzo was the clearest example. He was Tobirama's disciple. He had been Hiruzen's friend and supporter. If Hiruzen were still alive, with Tobirama's final wish behind him, Danzo would have remained a loyal pillar supporting Hiruzen's rule. But now Hiruzen was gone. And if the seat was empty, why could Danzo not sit in it? He was also Tobirama's disciple. So after a brief period of silence, Danzo stepped forward and openly entered the competition for third Hokage. He was not the first to do so. After him, several others also revealed their ambitions, all seeking the Hokage seat. And among the candidates, the head of the Uchiha clan was listed prominently. That was right. With the Hokage dead and the successor missing, the Uchiha clan grew bold again. They displayed their traditional confidence and attempted to run for third Hokage. That alone put enormous pressure on everyone else. For many within the village, it did not matter whether Hiruzen became Hokage or someone else did. Anything was better than allowing the Uchiha clan head to take power. Because they knew them too well. They understood exactly what would happen if that man gained authority. Konoha had never been short on people who clashed with the Uchiha. The Senju, as their long-standing rivals, went without saying. The Sarutobi clan and the Aino Shikacho clans were equally unwilling to see the Uchiha take the seat. Even the Hyuga clan, another great clan, did not want the Uchiha to rise above them. And there was another issue. Not long ago, the Uchiha had even incited a rebellion. That rebellion had been led by Uchiha Setsuna, and it was Tobirama himself who had suppressed it. With that stain still fresh in memory, the Uchiha clan had very little support. But turning around and supporting Danzo was also difficult for many to accept. Even Koharu, Homura, and the others felt the same. It was true they were Danzo's friends. But because they were his friends, they knew his nature better than anyone. Danzo worshipped Tobirama as his ideal, and his methods were cold and stern. On the surface, he resembled Tobirama. But he had failed to learn Tobirama's other qualities, and he had already begun walking a different path. If Danzo became Hokage, no one could say what kind of Konoha would follow. Just as in later years, after the third Hokage died in battle, Koharu and Homura chose to bring Tsunade back rather than place Danzo in the Hokage seat. Their judgment now was the same. With Hiruzen missing and no other truly suitable candidate, their eyes turned elsewhere. And in this situation, Kei stood out. Check out my Patreon for advanced chapters on all my fanfics. p@treon.com's fanficlord03. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Novel Wonderland.